Hello, members. Tom Morrison here from the home office of the Metal Treating Institute. I want to welcome you to Heat Treat Live. We're here with Jamie Nebel, which we're going to get to in a moment. But I want to let everybody know before you start thinking of questions, there is a little button on the bottom of your screen. If you just kind of scroll down there and put your cursor over the top of the bottom, you'll see a menu pop up and you'll see a room called chat. If you hit chat, it'll pop up along the right here, a place where you can type in messaging. And if you hear anything in this webinar or webcast that you would like to ask Jamie or myself about the content, please, or if you have a comment to a member that asks a question, please just type in the bottom and hit enter, and you'll see those quotes coming across, and we'll monitor those to ask Jamie. But a couple of big things happening at MTI before we get to the content. So our MTI members spring meeting in Hollywood, Florida at the beautiful Diplomat Hotel in Fort Lauderdale, Florida is coming up in April 25th to the 27th. You're going to want to be there. We have two dynamic keynotes and two panel discussions. One is by Kenneth Grombach, a demographer who has spoken at MTI in the past, and he is going to be bringing you the data and the information you need to show without hesitation that the largest economic boom we've ever had in our history for at least 15 years, we're in the beginning stages of that. And if you want to seize the moment and know what you need to do, one, you want to understand why is that different from what you're hearing on TV, you're going to want to be there because he's going to give you the information you need to understand that you need to get your workplace culture, your manufacturing processes, everything in line to seize the moment in the next 15 years so you can make the most money to put the most jobs out there for your company. So big things happening, and you want to be at the spring meeting. And also we have Mr. Jim Knight, formerly of Hard Rock Cafe International. He's developed all their workplace culture to create just a rock star environment at Hard Rock Cafes. And he's got a keynote that comes along and shows you how to have a rock star workplace culture. So two great keynotes, and then we got two panel discussions that's also going to be there. The second thing is our 2019 sales forecasting schedule has been put together. If you're looking out into the future of heat treat sales and you're like, I don't know where they're going, you need to attend our webinars on February 7th, May 9th, August 8th, and November 7th. We'll put those out in an email to you. But those are 30-minute webinars hosted by ITR Economics, our chief economic company, who looks at our sales data on a monthly basis and then forecasts for the next 3 years, and some dynamic things are going to be happening. And you want to be on every webinar because the economy shifts in a dynamic way, and those sales forecasts go up and go down, but things look positive. And they also outline the sales forecast for the top 20 industries that heat treaters serve. So it's information you can't afford to miss to be looking at the future. But meetings and sales forecasting, you want to stay abreast of that. But now what we want to do is jump into workplace culture. We got on the line today Mr. Jamie Nebel from Human Workplaces. Jamie? Yep. So Jamie, tell everybody, I'm excited. Members, you're going to love this. He just wrote a new book. It's not even out yet. You're going to be the first ones to get it nationwide, worldwide for that matter, called The No-Nonsense, Non-Obvious Guide to Employee Engagement That Drives Workplace Culture. So you're getting it first. They're actually in the room shipping them out today and tomorrow, so you're going to get them by the end of the week. So Jamie, tell everybody, what is Jamie Nebel all about? Where do you come from in terms of human workplaces?
So I actually got my start in the field of international conflict resolution. I did that about 25 years ago, and then I decided, you know what, this international ethnic conflict, that's too easy. I'm going to start working with management teams. And I transitioned into doing work in organizations. But for the last 10 years, my focus has really been on workplace culture. Really, before that, I was doing culture work. I just didn't call it that. And now Maddie Grant, who's the co-author of the book and my business partner, we have created a culture assessment and actually do almost all of our work about intentionally shaping workplace culture so that it drives success. We find that organizations basically usually ignore their culture or don't realize they have one, but they do. And it has a big impact on success. And so we're trying to help organizations just get more clear and intentional about that.
That's awesome. Well, members, if you look at the future and what Kenneth Grombach is going to show us, is that the reason this topic is so important is when you couple a 3.7% unemployment rate with the largest economic boom in our history, the question is can you afford to lose any of your talent and have it even go to your competitor amongst that boom? Why? Because you won't have enough people to process the throughput to maximize your sales, your revenues, your profits, everything, your productivity. So it's imperative that you have a culture that keeps people in your place of business. So Jamie, let me tell you, you've written 3 books on workplace culture. What's been the driver behind your passion to help people understand workplace culture in that mode?
Well, the fundamental actually driver for, I think, both me and Maddie in everything that we've written is trying to shine a light on the stuff that we're not seeing. Okay, in leadership and management and around culture and engagement, there's a lot of conversation about what we should do and what works best and what the best practices are, and they are frequently missing some really big pieces. They're missing really big trends or dynamics or patterns inside organizations that we're not addressing. So Humanize, we wrote that back in 2011. That was like, hey, social media, it's a big deal. It's changing things. It's not just changing communication, it's changing the way we lead and the way we manage. And we wanted to shine a light on that and sort of show organizations that are embracing this sort of new approach. Same with when millennials take over. That one was to sort of shine a light on the fact that we need to stop complaining about millennials, but also that they are pointing us towards the future of work. Now, they're not inventing it, but because of what shaped them, they are shining a light on these new directions that we're moving in terms of being digital and transparent and fluid hierarchies and all of that. So our goal has always been to sort of pull out that thing that people aren't seeing that's holding us back. And the new book is doing that with engagement, which we can talk about. But it's basically, our problem with engagement is we've been trying to make people happy, and that's not the problem. The problem is we need to make people successful, and the organizations that do that get the engagement. So that's been our motivation, is pull the stuff out that people aren't seeing so that we can use that and sort of get ahead.
You know, you've inspired me to go back and Google, as soon as we're off this thing, when baby boomers take over, and see if there's a book about that.
Yeah, maybe there is. I didn't even.
And go read it and see how close they were to the mark. That's going to be, I immediately just thought about that. So let's talk about something. So what is the state of employment engagement today, and how are people doing this? How are they proceeding with that?
So one reason why employee engagement gets so much attention is that the numbers are horrible. And you know, if there are different researchers that do this, that look into this. I tend to focus on Gallup. I think they've been doing it the longest. Their numbers around employee engagement, and by employee engagement, I mean, you know, everyone's been in this position in the workplace. Remember that time when you were really like firing on all cylinders and it was going well and you were focused and you were given energy and commitment and extra effort and all that? That's an engaged employee, right? You know what? How many we have those in our workforce? 33%.
Wow.
One out of three is the researchers say is actively engaged at work. And so my metaphor for this is, you've got a garage, you can use up to 12 cylinders, you can create a beautiful V12 Lamborghini and beat your competition, or you can do what average organizations are, which is drive around in a 4-cylinder Fiat. Like, that's what we're doing. We're driving around in this car and we're letting 2/3 of our potential go to waste.
Right.
And that what we're doing to fix that is basically running engagement surveys every year and asking people what they like and don't like, and then trying to use that data to solve problems. And we haven't moved the needle on that 33% figure in 15 years. I mean, literally 2001, it was 30%. So yes, we bumped it up by 3%. But if you really want to get to 100% engagement, I did the math. It's going to take 320 years
right.
at that rate to get there. So I feel like a big issue for me is, like, we got to admit that we don't know what we're doing here, right? Like, and that's part of we're not seeing something. We're obviously missing something if we're spending this much time trying to fix engagement and getting no results.
So I would assume, because what I've seen in studies, and somebody that teaches in our U.S. management training program, Dr. Rick Marks, he has shown that people aren't leaving their companies, they're leaving their boss, which means all the more reason why this is so important to put a resource like this. And I would assume that you would think that this isn't something for the owner to read or get to know, no matter what book you read or do, but you have the owners on this call, and all of our members have to get that information permeated down through the souls of their management team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, the solution to engagement is it exists at every level. Okay. I mean, I do like it when the senior level is paying attention to engagement and addressing it, but the actual solving of the problems is going to happen a couple of layers down. And the reason for that, and this is sort of one of the key ideas in the book, is that the source of disengagement is not the happiness piece. It's not that people are dissatisfied. The source of disengagement is you've created an organization where they can't be successful. Like,
Right.
that is it. And when you talk about creating an organization where your people can't be successful, that exists in multiple layers of management.
Right.
You've done that in a bunch of different ways, and you gotta unpack that and realize how is it about the way we're managing, the way we're running this place, that we're inhibiting the success of our people? And if you can change those things and make them more successful, then engagement goes through the roof. And
Yeah,
that's
because I think we forget sometimes that every single employee has a personal goal, a set of personal goals. And the number one influence on them achieving those goals is their place of work, whether it's emotional, a lot of it has to do with pay. And the happiness factor goes way up when they feel engaged at the workplace. I would totally agree with that.
Yeah. That happens later. You don't even need to focus on that. You need to focus on success. And I'm glad you brought up the sort of personal piece, because I think that gets overlooked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
For me to be engaged at work, the work I'm doing has to make sense to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And
especially with the younger generation, right?
Yeah. And it's actually, this is one of the epiphanies when we were writing the book. I was thinking, I realized there is a population out there, you'll resonate with this, Tom, I think, but there's a population out there that actually doesn't have an engagement problem. They're like pretty much 100% engaged all the time.
Right.
And they're entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? People who start and run their own businesses, they don't have a problem being engaged at work.
Right.
Right?
They got skin in the game.
Because their focus is on success all the time.
Exactly.
Right? And we've created organizations where we take that away from people. We don't let, we say, oh, well, you're down there, so you don't have to focus on the success of the enterprise. Here's the deal. When the work I'm doing, even if I'm successful in sales or marketing or IT or whatever my function is, if I see that the organization's failing, I'm also going to lose engagement. Right? I need to know that I'm contributing to a successful enterprise. We sort of relegate success to like the high level or the, like the strategy or something like that. And that's, I think, our biggest mistake around engagement, because when people can see themselves successful, both personally and in their individual work role and contributing to the success of the enterprise, that's when it comes together, and that's where you get to drive the Lamborghini after a while, as opposed to the Fiat.
So I would assume that a question that is missed constantly, I mean, I can remember back when I would hire even an administrative assistant years ago, I would ask them, so tell me what your number one personal goal is in the next 5 years. Because I knew that if she wanted to buy a home and she was working for $12 an hour, I needed to find a way to get her up the chain so she could have enough money to do that. Otherwise, she's temporary. So I would assume that you're saying that one of the biggest questions we could ask our people on an annual basis, one-on-one, is, Jamie, what would you say about your life would be your biggest set of goals for the next 3 to 5 years? And how do you feel like we can help you get there? And hear it from their perspective. Would that be a good question to ask?
Yeah. And I mean, it's also important to recognize that some of the things that they want are going to be out of your control.
Sure.
And that's fine.
But do you think the fact that you asked and listened, it pulls them closer to the organization?
Yes. Well, yes. And also it's not even that you asked and listened, because I think actually we do a lot of asking and a lot of listening with our employee engagement surveys.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't end up talking about the things that do make a difference in success.
Right.
So if you ask me about my personal goals, even if you can't get me there, like that's just sort of not your job, you got me thinking about it.
Right.
You got me focused on it. And I'm like, that's true. I do want to own a home in 5 years. Whatever it is, like whatever I sort of clarify and articulate, me getting clear on that answer, that's the benefit. Not even as much as you asked it or listened. Is that the clearer I can get on what makes me successful, then the more I'm giving my energy and attention and commitment to the work.
Right. So let's talk about the state of employee engagement today. I mean, what's going on in that? You mentioned something about what are people missing. I want be clear about what you think people are missing when you talk about that.
Yeah. So our goal is to fix the engagement problem. We know that we don't have enough engaged employees, so we need to fix that. Our approach is to try and figure out what people like and don't like about working. Like, that's it. Our engagement surveys are all like, hey, do you get enough feedback from your manager? Do you have enough resources to do your job? Do you like your computer equipment? Do you feel like decisions are made fast enough? Like, there's a million questions that get asked, but they're all asked with the intention of discovering, where are you happy and where are you not happy? What do you like and
Right.
what do you don't like? And it's well intended. You think, well, if I can find out what they don't like, and then I can take that information and say, well, they really don't like the decision making. They think we're too slow. So let's get faster, right? And you try. But the problem is, like, you're getting all these little bits and pieces of information about what people like and don't like. And that fast piece those people are unhappy about, maybe that doesn't matter.
Right.
Maybe that's not going to make you more successful. Maybe you'll actually be more successful if you slow down and increase your quality. I don't know what it is, right? But like the focus on making people happy pulls you away from what makes you successful. And so
Right.
year in, year out, you do little things to make people happy, and you might bump their happiness up a little bit, but because you weren't successful, they'll find something else to be unhappy about. You know what I mean? And so we've been laser focused on making them happy, and we've been ignoring the fact that ultimately it is success that drives engagement. It is engagement is a function of success. So if you actually flipped the model and said, wait a minute, what is it about our culture that's getting in the way of success? And you fixed that. And
Right.
particularly the patterns inside your culture. This is also what people miss. They want their culture to be like our core values and our really lofty, high, we're all about integrity and honesty.
We have
Great.
a ping pong table. It's
Yeah.
cool.
No. You need to get down to those nitty-gritty patterns, like, hey, how come it's okay to work with people from other departments, but only if you're at this level?
Right.
Right? And you didn't realize that was a pattern, that the people down here, you're up here and you think, of course we work cross-functionally, but you don't realize people down here don't feel like they have permission to do that.
Right.
And that's a pattern inside your culture. Now, if that pattern's getting in the way of success and you see it and you fix it, then you don't need to do an engagement survey, because people are like, oh, I can finally work with the people from another department. I'm actually meeting my quota this month. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you start solving people's problems so they're more successful, then they want to do more. Then you've got that energy, that commitment that you didn't know how to get at before. But it's all about finding and fixing the culture patterns, which is, again, it's not a capacity that a lot of organizations have. They don't get down to that level.
So let's dig into that real quickly. So 2 pieces of this. What conversations should people be having on an ongoing basis with their teams? And what questions should they be thinking of asking to their teams at some point to start dig into that information?
So one of the key pieces that needs to get done early is to be able to articulate what I call the what is of your culture. Like, you got to be good at saying, what is our culture? And not we're a family, right? Not the really positive stuff.
Right.
That's fine that you're a family and you love each other. Great. I mean, what is it like to work there? How do you do things? And there's some critical areas that need attention. Number one, this will vary a little bit depending on your organization, but collaboration. How do you do collaboration inside your organization? Not are you good at it or bad at it, but just how do you do it? Is this a place where people are always sharing information, or do you actually have some swim lanes that you keep people in because that's the way it needs to be? You can do it either way, but you need to be able to say, how do we do this?
Right.
And collaboration, transparency is another one, information sharing, and innovation. Those would be the 3 that I would start with. How do you do innovation? Do you value creativity? Do you get past the we've always done it that way excuse? But also, do you run experiments? Do you do beta testing? Like, it's not just the talk of innovation, but do you walk the walk? These kinds of conversations need to be happening at a senior management level, but even down below in the departments. How do we do this stuff? And the more specific you are in articulating, oh yeah, this is exactly how we do it. We let these people make these decisions, but these ones, no, not at all. And when you start to connect dots between patterns, that's when it gets interesting. But it all starts with being able to say what is. So I think that's where people have to start.
Well, we are in a hyper-speed economy now, and everybody I ever listened to says it's not going to get any slower. And innovation, I think, is really key to anyone, especially in the manufacturing sector as we are. Can you drill down a little bit more into how you have seen companies utilizing their entire company of workers in that workplace culture to drive innovation?
So one of the patterns that I'm noticing, and because we've done our culture assessment with a fairly large number of organizations now, and I'm seeing within innovation this pattern that I mentioned a minute ago, which is we're really good at the concepts of innovation, right? In our culture, when I ask people, hey, are you able to be creative in work? Or do you just have to sort of follow the rules and just do what you're told? And a lot of organizations are really embracing creativity. They're getting that that's important, and that's an important part of innovation. We're creative. We do inspirational work. Again, we get past the "we've always done it that way" excuse. We're willing to do new things, right? That's all at the concept level. And that's important. You need those concepts for innovation. But then I ask them, hey, do you create containers within which people can actually run experiments and learn? They're like, well, not as much. Okay, how about risk taking? How are you on risk taking and managing failure? We push that down low. I see a lot of people on beta testing. Like, do you literally give a piece of what you're doing to a stakeholder or a customer before it's done and get feedback on it?
Right.
And people are like, no, we can't take that kind of risk. We can't do that.
They might tell us it's not working.
Right. Which would be great. Like that would be the victory, right?
Wouldn't you want to find that halfway in instead of when you're done?
Exactly. So we're moving. Innovations become so popular that we're injecting it into our culture, but only at the concept level, not at the action, rubber meets the road, try new things level. And so when that pattern becomes clear, my advice to what I've seen organizations do is once they see that, they're like, oh, I get that. That's our pattern. So I'm like, well, what are you going to do differently then? And they're like, oh, well, we just need to tell people to innovate more. Like, no, you got to get more specific than that.
Right.
What processes are you going to change? And my favorite one that I recommend to people is like, you want more experimentation? Then you guys have a dashboard. Everybody has a dashboard. Everyone's got a data that comes up from managers that goes up to senior level on a monthly or quarterly basis. Put 2 new numbers on your dashboard. Number 1, from every manager, how many experiments did you run last period? Number 2, what percentage of them failed, and what did you learn? And if you got managers that post zeros, you need to talk to them.
Right.
Why are you not running an experiment? And why? Or, hey, we ran 20 experiments and they all succeeded. Like, then you're doing it wrong. If your experiments all succeed, you're only doing stuff you already know how to do. Right. I gotta have some that fail, and I want to know what you learned from it. But like, if you forced managers to report those 2 numbers, you would get different behavior in your culture. Right? You would have more experimenting happening on a regular basis, if that's what you particularly needed in your, to solve success in your culture patterns. But it's almost that simple. You can change any process like that and get different behavior. And so I'm a big fan of once people see the patterns, I'm like, then just start running plays, start changing stuff. Just like, don't create a 3-year plan and a task force that's going to study this for 18 months. Start doing things and learn from it. It's not that hard if you have that clarity around the patterns.
Well, when you say ask your customer, it cracks me up because it takes me back to the days when Apple and Microsoft began to highly compete. And you would get a new program for Apple, and then you would get a update to fix the problems. And I can imagine that team meeting when they asked Steve Jobs, we can't put it out there because we don't know what's wrong with it. And he says, you know what? Just release it to the customers because they'll tell us in a heartbeat what's wrong. Yep. And they've done that forever. They put a product out and there's patches within 30 days after it's done because they hear from the community.
No, well, that's actually, we identified that in When Millennials Take Over, the digital mindset, which the software companies have been embracing for a long time. We need to be doing that actually within management, of just like trying things and releasing it to the employees and letting them give feedback on whether it's working or not, and then adapting it. Like that same idea, we tend not to apply that internally. And I think there's actually a lot of opportunity there. So
in the big picture of things, talk about how increased and maximize employee engagement changes the workplace culture and how that permeates that with everybody.
So the way that culture and engagement sort of are woven together is that engagement is fundamentally driven by whether you can be successful or not. This is another piece, sort of another layer of what I think people are missing. What people miss is that your culture is actually the biggest lever you have to impact success in the workplace. Again, because as I said before, a lot of organizations have there's a colleague of ours, Arlene Petranton, says you either have a culture by design or a culture by default.
I love it.
Okay, and those are your only two choices. Okay,
right?
Because there's no choice where, well, I don't have a culture, or I'll develop it later. No, you have one. It's either been designed intentionally, or it's the default culture that you just inherited organically.
Right.
And most organizations have done the culture by default, which means there are a lot of opportunities for improvement. Whereas when you look at your strategy and you look at your operations, we've already squeezed the juice out of that one. You know what I mean? There's not a lot that you can do. I mean, there's always stuff to improve.
Sure.
That's fine. But the margins are getting smaller on what we get out of those improvements. But the margins for improving culture and aligning it with what drives success are huge. Right? Like when you realize that the strategy you've chosen can't be implemented because we don't let the people who are on the ground make the decisions. Right? Then you make that kind of change, and suddenly you've leapfrogged the competition.
Right?
You've made gains that you thought weren't possible. So for me, and again, this is, I'm the guy that does culture work, so I'm with the culture hammer, everything looks like a culture nail, right? But I'm finding that there's just so much opportunity for when you can align cultures in a way that is much more about what drives our success as an organization, and not about what sounds cool or whether you have ping pong tables or Taco Tuesdays. That is not the point. That makes people happy, and there's nothing wrong with making people happy. But that's a low margin success impact is the Taco Tuesdays. People are a little bit happier, that's great. But when you speed up decision making, or because you change the cultural expectations of who can decide, or when you break down the silos and enable collaboration that didn't happen before, so that the customer gets the solution faster, right? Those things are all inhibited by culture. And so the engagement work, where you get people to be more energized around the activities they're doing, is actually just culture work.
Right.
This is my secret for folks. If you do the culture work, the engagement piece happens on its own.
Right.
And that's what I've seen in our case studies from our previous book. They're some of the few organizations that have close to 100% engagement, the ones that we studied. They don't have an employee engagement program. Right? That's not what they do. They have a let's make this organization awesome program.
Right.
And then the engagement happens sort of as a result. So I actually think we need to be doubling down on our culture management efforts and building in systems where we're constantly sensing and responding for where's our culture suddenly out of alignment and how do we fix that? Right. Because your point about the changing environment and this growth that we're going to experience,
mm-hmm.
That means what drove your success yesterday is going to be different than what drives your success today.
Sure.
And when your success drivers shift, your culture has to shift along with it.
Right.
Even if you had a great culture 3 years ago, if the success drivers change, then your culture needs to change.
It's a moving target.
And so that's why people say, "Oh, well, we'll do culture next year." No, you are doing culture all the time. It's like.
Would you say if that's the would you say you're running backwards? That you're literally running backwards the whole time you're not driving culture?
Yeah, I mean it's like walking. You're walking on a moving sidewalk that's going the other way.
Right.
Okay, so you're still making some progress, but you're like,
slow.
Why am I going so slow? What is this? It's like, well, first of all, get on the other side, and it's going that way.
Right.
And I haven't even thought of that metaphor, but when your culture is aligned with success, then your competitors are just on the regular ground.
Right.
So they're walking the same speed as you and you're beating them because the culture is that sort of that boost when it's aligned. But again, that requires more constant attention, I think, than most people have been willing to put in.
You know, it's funny, this whole entire conversation, what has caught my eye the last 10 minutes is I've realized I have 6 millennials from 24 to 29, 3 children, 3 spouses, and I watch and listen to them constantly on what their biggest beef when they come home from work and say, how was your day? When it's bad, it's always about the company getting in the way of them being successful. Because what they want to do is they want to be they all want to be successful for their company, because they understand if they're successful, the company is successful, but the company is forgetting to put their success in the equation. And it's just all about, you need to come to work and do these things so that we, the company, can be successful instead of empowering them to be successful. It's a big revelation as I'm thinking of the conversations I'm having with them as you're talking.
Yeah, no, it's definitely about getting in the way. And that's one of the reasons why we ended up moving into culture, because that's where we get in the way the most.
Right.
Is in the way we create cultures that don't value the behaviors that drive the success. Again, we say we want honesty and integrity and innovation and quality and collaboration and all the great sounding words in our core values posters. But we never get down to the nitty gritty of, okay, this is what it looks like in the real world. Here's how we actually do these things.
Right.
Here are the behaviors that I want. Here are the behaviors that I don't want. And then when you engage in the behaviors that I don't want, I'm going to have to fire you.
Right.
We don't have those conversations either, right? Like, so there's a whole, I don't know, talent management, HR side of this, which is once you're clear on culture, folks, you got to build your HR systems to support that stuff.
Right.
And so there's often a lot of change that happens. It has to happen on that side too.
So let's get into practicality now, where people can write some really serious things. I hear you have, I guess in the book, a playbook model of how to really kind of implement this. So expand on that and tell us what that's about. Yeah. So, well, I mean, it emerged actually a couple of years ago when Maddie and I were first building our culture assessment with another partner of ours, a guy named Charlie Judy. We were so focused on building our culture assessment, and we were biased. We really like it, right? So we're looking at this assessment. It's great, and we're showing it to people, and they're like, "Wow, this is really cool." And they look at it, and they're like, "Yeah, but what do I do? Right?
What do I do with this?" And that was a lightning bolt for me, which is, I'm not solving the problem of understanding culture. I'm solving the problem of doing something about it.
Right.
We need to do something, and so we basically built a whole project around coming up with a culture playbook. Like, we knew that's the deliverable. Like, whatever you do, you got to run some plays.
Right.
And I almost feel embarrassed, like, choosing a boring sports metaphor. Like, really, I'm a consultant and I'm using a sports metaphor, but it works. You just run plays.
Right.
Let me tell you one quick story. So we were working with a big organization, and they did a regular employee engagement survey, and it came back with all these negative answers around agility. Right? They were saying, and it was a big organization, and big organizations are often not agile.
Right.
So they were like, oh, so now they're worried, like, well, we're not agile. What are we going to do? So they did what any big corporation do. They created a slide deck, right? And so the last slide in the deck said, and I think we wrote about this in the book. It says, don't just say you're agile, be agile. And I'm like, what? What does that even mean? Right. What do I do with that? And it's like, if I'm a coach of a professional football team, and I turn to my players and say, hey, don't just say you're going to score a touchdown. Score a touchdown. You don't tell your players to score a touchdown. You run plays.
Right.
You design and run plays that are designed to get the ball down the field into the end zone. And so from a culture point of view, we wanted to give people the ability to just run some plays.
Right.
And actually there's 6 sections of the playbook. The first 3 are available to everybody. Doesn't matter where you are in the organization, what level, what department. These are areas that you can work on. One is process. If you manage people, then you have a staff meeting. You could change that staff meeting in a way that would shift the culture a little bit. That's just your little domain. It's not a big change, but that's a process change you could run. The experiment metrics piece, that's a process change, right? We used to not have those experiment metrics on our dashboard. Now we do. We just made that change. So process, anyone can change. Structure can be changed. That's a little bit, you can't change your whole organizational structure if you're at the bottom of the pyramid, but there are ways that you can reorient, redistribute your team if you're getting things done. So you can change structure on your own, and you can change technology. Technology is one of the biggest culture sections of the culture playbook. What technologies are you using to get work done? Because if you used technology in a way that you hadn't seen before, that can have a big impact on the culture.
Right.
So like even on innovation, I use this one all the time. there's a product called Idea Scale. It's an idea management software. Like, what if you actually asked your people to come up with innovation ideas, and then you had them vote them up or down using software? You could get lots of cross-functional information sharing and idea generation out of that. And that's just using a piece of software.
Right.
So some of them are small. Now, some of them are big, like, hey, we're going to change our entire performance management system to reflect our new cultural approach. Okay, that's going to take a while, and that's going to be a big play, and that'll involve HR, et cetera, et cetera. So HR has its own section of the playbook, and there's some plays that are around culture management and building that capacity. But the three big areas where I guarantee you could sit down, if you figured out what your culture pattern problems were, you could sit down and say, what are some processes I can change? What's some structure or design that I could alter? And what are some technology plays that I could run that would move the needle and change these patterns and help our people be more successful? So yeah, we always end up saying, there's your playbook model. Just run some plays and do what any coach would do. When the play doesn't work, pull it.
Right.
And then send it back to the drawing board and try something else. And always have a backlog of other plays that you can pull from and say, you know what? We tried this one's not working, but let's try this instead. Maybe we needed to do this play first. So if that technology play doesn't work, okay, scrap it, and then maybe work on some processes first. And build some capacity maybe for communication. Then by the time you run that technology play down the road, it works. So
out of the playbook model, so who manages the engagement process? Does it get down to the owner? Is it the C-suite, the middle manager? Who really runs that?
Well, this one depends a little bit on the size of the organization too. I actually think, and we write about this in the book, I think it's really time for human resources to kind of step up. When it comes to culture and culture management. Mm-hmm. And like, sort of, don't get me started on HR, the HR function. I feel like they're kind of, if they don't already know how to do it, they don't want to get involved.
Right.
Is sort of my, and that's not every HR obviously, but that's a pattern. I want HR to sort of step up and say, look, the functioning of this business, the level of profits, the level of success we have depends on having Lamborghini level of engagement, not Fiat level of engagement. Okay?
Right.
So this is not like a soft kind of squishy thing. This is like, we either beat the competition with a better tool, better car, or we don't. Right. So here's what I want to do. I actually want to create a new set of metrics. I want to track our culture on a regular basis and track how it's meshing or not meshing with success. And then I want to run our playbook, but I want to measure the impact it's having on the culture and on success at the same time. And in the absence of HR doing that, it's going to be somebody on the C-suite. Right. that has to run that. Somebody has to take a stand to say, this is make or break for us. Mm-hmm. This is how we beat the competition. So this is not something I can delegate. And so I actually think it would be better for a chief people officer, a chief talent and culture officer to run that from the C-suite. But if you don't have that capacity in-house, then COO or CEO should at least be freeing up resources to make it happen.
Right. So we've talked a whole lot about employee engagement, how it relates to workplace culture, and who should really drive it and what's missing. So as we round turn 4, everybody listening on here has their pen out, about to write. If they walk away from this webcast with the 3 things that you'd say, you know what, if you do nothing else between now and June, here's the 3 things that you need to do in your organization if you're going to begin to have a culture that you design, not one that you default. What would those 3 things be, James?
All right, so number 1, and this won't apply to everybody, but if you are doing an employee engagement survey or an employee satisfaction survey, sometimes they're called, the first thing you need to do is stop doing that. Okay, I for a while I was going to try and be nice about engagement surveys because it's a big industry and I'm probably going to make people mad about this, but we have to stop them. They are distracting. They move you in the wrong direction. They're a complete waste of resources. And a lot of people say, oh, but we've done them 10 years and I have all this data. And stop it. Stop the engagement survey. So number one, don't do that. But that's sort of not doing anything. That's the opposite. But still,
Right.
get that done. Once that's not happening, the first thing to do, and I said this earlier, is you have to write up some sort of document that explains what your culture is. And again, the critical piece, it's the what is, not the what should be.
Right.
Do not write a beautiful vision statement about how awesome your culture should be or how awesome you want it to be. I need brutal honesty about what is our culture. How do we do things here? And I mentioned before, sort of key areas to look at are going to be innovation, collaboration, and transparency, and to some extent agility. Kind of, maybe those are the 4 areas that I would make sure you write something up. I want a couple of pages on how do we do agility here? What does that mean here? How do we do transparency here? What does that mean? What does it look like? And I want a couple of pages of raw truth that says, here's the deal. We don't do anything unless the CEO tells us to do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's the truth, then you got to write that truth. If it's like, or if the truth is, here's the deal. We pretend like we're telling the senior staff what's going on, but we keep them out of it because they just screw things up and we do it on our own. Like, we need that kind of truth, that kind of what is, because it's only when you write that piece out that you can connect the dots.
So so are you saying you should have all your employees take a shot at writing what they feel the culture is, and then you take all that input?
I would have, well, see, there's a million ways to do it. There are culture assessments out there that'll give you some data on this. But you don't need that data. What I would actually, probably the best way to structure it is a series of conversations.
Right.
I want people at different levels to have that conversation and then record, not literally record, but write down the results of that conversation, and then do that 15 times in different areas and get all those 15 sets of notes. Look at those together, then you'll start to see it.
Right.
And it's because if you just make it all about one pure document, then it gets wordsmithed and it ends up being sort of meaningless in the end. So, but it's more conversation based than it is sort of trying to get to the one single truth. This is why even when we use our assessment with clients, every now and then they obsess over the numbers. We're like, why is this a 6.3? And I'm like, folks, it doesn't matter. The numbers are just guiding us towards this conversation. It's the conversation where we actually get clear on what's going on in our culture and how that's getting in the way of success. So it's about those conversations, and you want to get as many of those as you can.
So real quick, Jamie, one of our members, Mike Reichling, asked, what were those 4 things again? Innovation, culture, agility?
Innovation, collaboration, agility, and transparency.
Okay, I just typed them in the...
And so, I mean, there's 8 different, there are other areas to look at, but those are I would start there, basically.
Okay. All right, I just put them out on the site. Okay.
There you go. Innovation, agility, collaboration, transparency.
Awesome. So did that wrap up the 3 things, or was there one more?
I guess, I mean, there's a little bit of repeating what we said before, but like, stop the engagement surveys, get just pull that plug. Number 2, nail the what is of your culture. Get that out there. Do the conversations, make it clear. And then number 3 is pick a play and run it. Like, you got to do one thing once you connect the dots.
Right.
And so long term, I think you need a whole playbook. I think you need sort of some infrastructure to support this work. That's fine. That'll take time. But pick one thing that can be done fairly quickly and that is visible.
Right.
Like, I mean, I always mention the staff meeting thing. Staff meetings do not make or break organizations for the most part. But if you realize that there was a pattern, like nobody we worked with an organization that is private equity funded. So they're buying up companies left and right. And everyone's like, I have no idea what the CEO even thinks. Right. Because, like, who are we? They're all like freaking out. And this is such an easy play. And the CEO started doing it even before the culture team recommended it. But they're like, all right, we just need to do quarterly all hands meetings. I got to get, because he's distributed global organization, right? So it's like, I got to get on Zoom like
Right.
once a quarter and just talk and tell people what I'm doing and what I'm thinking.
Right.
And that's not a revolutionary thing. That's not going to have a huge impact, but it's a real visible thing that people realize, he's listening, first of all.
Right.
And two, he's actually addressing part of our challenge, which is we are not all on the same page.
Right.
Because it's moving so fast and we need to do things to get on the same page. This one meeting is not going to, revolutionize it, but it shows that we're moving in that direction.
Right.
So dump the engagement surveys, clarify the what is of your culture, and then pick a visible, almost not symbolic because I want it to be real, but a visible and meaningful play to run immediately.
Right.
To show that you've connected the dots.
Right.
That creates the little bit of momentum that you can then turn into a flywheel, right? Because now people are a little bit like, okay, we're going in the right direction. And then they'll give you a little more slack to develop the other stuff.
Because they see you running the right direction.
Yeah.
So one of our members just popped in a great question. So it's from Amberly. So what do you do if you don't like the culture you come up with? Where do you start and how do you rewrite it?
So like you do the what is, and then you realize, whoa, this is horrible. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's usually not that bad, for the record. We obviously didn't go into all the details, but another step, once you get the what is piece, and you realize this is not cool, your next challenge is to be able to articulate exactly why the what is now is getting in the way of success.
Right.
And we missed that one. We were like, I don't like this culture. We're not collaborative. And my first response is, do you need to be collaborative? Right. Because if you can be unbelievably successful without collaborating, then keep doing that.
Right.
But if you could, and most people can't, for the record, but
sure.
If you can say, no, here's the deal, because our customers always have these sort of cross-functional needs, but they get their answers from our one little silo, and it's really frustrating. I'm like, so that's getting in the way of success. You have to, then you would basically be able to articulate and say, well, then our priority right now needs to be on really beefing up collaboration in this way and that way and the other way.
Right.
But the whole point is you were able to tie it back to what drives success. When people see that, it makes sense, and then they're behind you on this one. And so much of the efforts to change culture are because the senior level realizes this culture is not working for us, and so they then declare what the new culture is going to be.
Right.
And what you need to do is say, wow, here's our current culture. Here's how it's getting in the way of success, and that's why we need to move it in this direction. Suddenly people are with you. They don't resist. Right. I can't remember if I said this to you or when I spoke before, but people always say people resist change. And I'm like, nope, they do not resist change. They resist doing things they think are stupid.
Exactly.
And they resist doing things that don't make sense to them.
Right.
And so the success driver piece is so critical, because then people are like, well, oh yeah, I get that.
Right.
That is getting in the way of success. So I will go in that direction. I mean, you'll still get some resistance, but a lot less when you can paint that picture. So rewriting your culture has to include that next step, which is aligning with the success drivers. Then doing the playbook in terms of long-term change.
So one last question. So you've written this piece on your culture and you don't like it. Should you, even before that or after that, go to your full team and say, if you could define success for this company through your eyes, what are the 4 or 5 things that would drive that success to you? And then culminate that in a compiled status and decide to come up with the key things and then present it back and see everybody's buying. I mean, so you would go and ask the full team, what do they feel success is that drives the company through their mind? Yeah,
one of the approaches we use with clients on this question is to frame it as, and it's a little cheesy, but it seems to be working. What are your superpowers?
Right.
Right. And because when you ask people what drives success, they'll say like sales, or quality, or they'll like, success can't just be doing your job, right? Like it's got, what I'm looking for is what's the difference between this level and this level. Right. Right. And that requires a superpower. And that's a conversation that is not frequently had, actually. And I
Right.
think it's been amazing to me when I have these conversations that when I first say, what are the superpowers or what's the difference between exceptional performance and good performance, I get a lot of blank stares. And so it is usually a great exercise to get people to either write down or have some conversations about what really is it. Like this private equity company that we worked with, the culture team was freaking out because they used to be all these different companies, and they didn't know which end was up, right? They didn't know what their direction was.
Right.
The CEO was really helpful with them because he met with them and they were talking about where they wanted to take the culture, and he interrupted them and said, "Hey, we're an investor-led company."
Right.
And they're like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what do you think the investors want?" And they're like, "A return." A return on their investment? He said,
Right.
yes. How are we going to get that? By growing.
Right.
And it was a huge light bulb for them because they're like, yes, we have to grow. And then they could come back to him and say, well, that's exactly why we need to get clear on what direction we're going on. And that's exactly why we need to bust these silos, because I can't cross-sell if I don't even know what my company does.
Right.
Right? And so they were all completely on the same team, but it needed that little bit of, wait a minute, let's get clear on what's really going to get us to the next level,
right,
as a success driver. And once you're on the same page on that, then you basically know what to change, right? That's going to guide your playbook, your playwriting, because you're like, all right, then what plays would we run to make sure we can cross-sell better, or whatever the details are.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, Jamie, I know we're running out of time, so I just want to tell everybody thank you today for being here. Members, this book you're going to receive in the next 48 hours. It's a workbook. It's not a reader book. It's a workbook. Every manager and you should be going through it to help do the things that Jamie's talking about so you can get ready for this massive boom coming our way. The other thing that you need to know is that this piece is going to be on your app tomorrow. Oop, that's not it. Right there. The MTI app. It'll be posted out in our online forum that everybody can see. Spread this thing throughout your organization. Have everybody be a mandate to watch this 50 minutes and hear what Jamie's got to say and the big conversation. And then put on your calendars January 22nd for the next edition of Heat Treat Live, where we're going to talk industry specifications. Lots of things going on with ASTM, CQI-9, NAGCAP, and the AMEC committee in the aerospace industry. Lots of stuff going on to change how you do business and your quality standards. We're going to have 3 panelists who are going to come on and tell you everything you need to know about that. So, Jamie, thank you very much again for being here. Say bye to our crowd.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And members, remember, you're not just strong, you're MTI strong, my friends. Have a great day. Call us if we can do anything for you. Thank you very much for being a member.